Now, in the last video, I showed you how to set up your results table. Now what I've gone ahead and done, I've collected all of the results for all of the different measurements, and these are the results that I got. Now, obviously, for anyone doing the experiment, these numbers are going to look slightly different, but should be, if they're using the same spring, should be at least roughly the same. And now I'm going to show you how you can calculate all of these numbers here relatively easily, how to calculate all of this, and then also we're going to be drawing our graphs. So, first of all, we are going to say we want all of these to have 2 decimal places. For the most part, they do, because when you use a stopwatch, it gives you seconds accurate to the nearest hundredth of a second. So I'm just going to make sure it's just not the case with this one. I got really lucky here and I just ended up on 6.00, and I just want to make sure that everything looks consistent. So I just want to make sure that I've got 2 decimal places for all of them. Now, calculating averages in a spreadsheet is fairly simple. Just like before, we are now wanting to do a calculation. So what I need to do is type in equals on my keyboard. And all I need to do to calculate the average for that particular row is just type in average, open bracket, and now I just need to highlight all of these numbers here to say what I want to calculate the average of. And then I just press enter and it gives me the average for that particular number. And it's a number that we would roughly expect. We want to have some sort of a, approximation for the number that we get. And then of course we do the same thing for all the other ones. Now again, we could just type this in equals average for all of them, but luckily we have computers to do the work for us here. So from here, all that we're going to do is we're going to just take this thing here and we're just going to drop it down. This assumes that you want to use the same formula as we used here for this row, as we do here for this row, here for this row, and so on. Okay, so this way it makes it a little bit easier just to calculate your numbers and to do it quickly. And obviously you could do this on your calculator as well, but it's just a slightly faster way of doing it. Now we're going to need to find the time of one oscillation. And again, like we said, we want to just take this number here now, and we want to divide it by 10 to find one oscillation. And again, we type in equals, we select the row that we, the cell that we want, and we're going to divide it by 10. So we just go /10, and it gives us that number divided by 10. And we do the same thing for all of the other ones here as well. Okay, so now you can see that we've got this number divided by 10 is that, and so on. Now you'll notice here that it gives us a few more decimal places than this one here does. And that's because we haven't set this column here to be rounded, because at the end of the day, what you could do is you could increase the number of decimal places, right? And you can see that that is not perfectly to 2 decimal places, but we just want to round it to that point. So this one here, we're going to give that one the same treatment and say that we want to decrease the number of decimal places so it looks somewhat similar here. Okay. Now, from here, we're going to need to graph our results. And just like I told you in one of the last videos where we used the same tool to graph, we want to have something on the x-axis and we want to have something on the y-axis. We want to have mass, our independent variable, on the x-axis. Independent variable always goes on the x-axis. This is no exception. We want the dependent variable, the time of one oscillation, to go on the y-axis. So we said independent variable, dependent variable. This one goes on the x-axis. This one goes on the y-axis. And all I'm going to do now is just copy all of the stuff here and paste it down here. This one here, I want to copy that and paste it over here. as well. Now, you'll notice that what's happened here. What's happened is it's just pasted this column here again, but that's not what I wanted. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight this, copy this, but I wanted to only paste the numbers. So I right click, paste special, and paste values only. Okay, and now it gives me the values that I was expecting. So let me frame that just so it looks more consistent with the rest of my table here. And also I want to just make sure that this is to the nearest, decrease the number of decimal places so it looks exactly the same as it does over here. Cool, now I've got my x-axis, my y-axis. So I want to graph this. So I select all of this, insert, chart, and you can see here that it comes up with a chart of my values here. Make sure that as you are inspecting your chart, just to make sure that everything is looking okay, that you've got your labels for your axes, x and y axis, that there's a title, and now we can start to do the analysis of what we did earlier. By the way, if it doesn't come up with a scatter plot straight away, then you must change that to scatter chart just over on this side over here. By default, it might default into a bar chart, or it might default into a line chart or whatever, but that's not what we want. We want a scatter chart, which you can find down here. So it's already selected that for me here. So, and this again is why it's important that you have your units showing in your column headings over here, because it'll just take the name of this column, the name of this column, and just put that here straight away, so you don't need to make any alterations. Cool. From here then, how what type of relationship is this? Well, if you recall, this is a square root relationship. Remember, we're only going to give you either a square relationship, an inverse relationship, or a square root relationship. And the square root is the only one that has this kind of shape out of those three. Okay, so we can be pretty sure that this is indeed the type of relationship. Now, of course, having all of this data here in one place, that's all good and fine, but we want to show it in our report. And so now I'll show you how you can bring your actual results into that report. So we're going to highlight all of this. In fact, we are going to highlight all of this here because pretty soon we're going to need to have another column here for our transformed data. And we're going to copy, and we're going to paste that in here. And if you paste it, if you paste your table, you'll see that you'll get an option to either just link to the spreadsheet or to paste it unlinked. If you paste it unlinked, then whatever number you change over in your table here will not update in your spreadsheet. What we're going to want to do is link to spreadsheet and paste. Okay, and here you can see that our table is in here. Let me just tidy this up a little bit so that it's a little bit easier to work with. So now we don't need to even rewrite anything just in case we've made a mistake. If we've made a mistake, we can just change one thing over here in this table here, and it will get updated automatically within this table here. Okay, so that is that turns out to be very handy. Now, from here we also want to include the graph, and we're going to give that exactly the same treatment as we did with the table. So we're going to select the graph, copy, or you can go right click, I believe. No, just Control C. Go back into your report and paste the graph. And again, we see the same the same behavior happening here, and we're going to link that to the spreadsheet as well. So just in case we change anything in our numbers here, it will get updated automatically and we don't need to worry about it. All right, so this is our graph. Now, we need to have some kind of a statement on what type of relationship we're dealing with. Now, we established that this is a square root relationship. So we can say, based on this graph, I can tell that that period is proportional to the square root of mass, or square root m, like that. This is one way that you can write, and this is perfectly valid. But it's probably a little bit better to just give this the mathematical treatment. So now I'll show you how you can actually write math equations in this document. So what we're going to do is go up here to Insert, Equation. And now we get a special little text field over here, and we've got some sort of equation tools up here as well. Okay, so here we've said that period is proportional. Now, I showed you the proportionality symbol in a previous video. I'll show you now how you can write it in the equation editor. So what you do is you do backslash on your keyboard, should be close to your enter key, and you write down prop2 and you press space. That turns it into a proportionality symbol. And since period is proportional to the square root of the mass, now we want to write down square root mass. How do you write a square root? Well, if you are unsure and you can't quite remember the commands for that, that's fine. There's a drop-down box over here where you can have all kinds of different relationships. And what we want is the square root symbol, so we click on that. And we want the square root of mass, just like that. Okay. Now this basically summarizes in a couple of symbols what we've said over here. Now, you absolutely must mention this part here in some way, shape, or form. If you mention it this way, that's fine. If you mention it this way, that's fine, but it must be in your report, because if it isn't, then you then this part is missing. This recognition that this is indeed the relationship is missing, and therefore you cannot proceed. This is very, very important. This is a key part in your assessment. Now you'll notice that this is a little bit small, so what I usually do, just to make it a little bit more readable, is just to increase the font size of that a little bit. And then you can see, well, here, this font size is a little bit nicer. Or you can just keep it over there, no problem. Now from here, since it is proportional to the square root of the mass, what type of transformation do we have to do? So we go back into our data. What type of transformation do we have to do? Well, since it's a square root relationship, therefore that must be reflected in our results table as well. So how are we transforming our x values? Well, we are taking the square root of all the masses. So over here, we're saying SQRT, or square root mass. And the unit of that is going to be square root kilograms. Just like that. Now, from here, we're going to just take the square roots of all of these numbers here individually. So this becomes equals SQRT for square root, open bracket, and we want the square root of this number. Close bracket, enter. And you'll see that we get a very long decimal number. That's fine for now, and we want to give the same treatment to all of these other numbers here. So we just drag that down like this. Okay, and you can see here that these are all the numbers that we want. And then from here, we want to fix the number of decimal points a little bit. So we go over here and decrease that because we cannot justify possibly that we have numbers that are that accurate. So we're gonna have it to the same number of decimal places as we do this one here. And then we can just tidy the formatting up a little bit, just to make sure that everything looks consistent here. Okay, just like that, put a border around it. And now with any luck, we should see that in our table as well. It hasn't updated yet, so we just click the update button here. And what we see now is the square root of the mass in here as well. And consequently, things have shifted slightly, but that's all right. We can tidy this up later. All right. So now we've got the actual chart. Of course, we need to graph the transformed values. So what we're going to do is copy all of these numbers, paste them over here. Now again, this is a formula, so what we want is just the values only. So we go to paste special, values only. And then of course we fix the number of decimal places again. So we decrease that number down to where we want. Put in the formatting just like we want. And this isn't absolutely necessary, but I just like doing it this way because it's a little bit easier to look at. And then we want time for one oscillation. That was on our y-axis. And we copy that in there as well. Once again, paste special, paste values only. And then keep the same formatting here. Like that. And we want that to 3 decimal places as well. That should be fine. Oops, like that. Right, and now we can graph it. So, graphing it just like we did before. Selecting that table, insert, chart, and look at that. We get a nice straight looking graph. Okay, so from here, we need to do a couple of things. Well, we need to add a couple of things to this graph. Just double check that your axes are labeled, that you've got a title, and then we're going to go to customize, and we're going to need to add our trend line. So we go series, trend line down here. You can see it's added the trend line, and yeah, it turns out we were really good at collecting our data. That means that all these points are really, really close to the actual straight line. So that's actually really good news for us. And then we give it a label, and we're going to use the equation. Okay, and so you can see here that we've got the equation of the straight line. And of course, we are going to copy and paste this chart into our report as well. So that goes in here. And again, we're going to link it to the spreadsheet, just like that. Okay. And that's how we show the results in our actual report.